You know the feeling, right? If you've ever had a garden, a farm, or heck, even just a single potted plant, you turn your back for what feels like a minute, and suddenly, they're there. Weeds, the ultimate uninvited guests, unwanted and unbelievably persistent. But what if winning the war on weeds isn't about fighting harder, but about thinking a whole lot smarter? Let's dive in and figure out how to reclaim our space.
It's the question that's haunted gardeners for, well, forever. They just seem to grow faster, stronger, and with way more determination than anything we actually want to grow. But maybe the problem isn't their strength. Maybe it's our strategy.
For most of human history, this was pretty much the only answer. Getting down on your hands and knees and just pulling. And look, it's a direct approach. It works. But as we all know, it's really just a temporary fix in what feels like a permanent war. The second you clear a patch, another weed is already planning its takeover. We've got to think bigger.
And that's where we make the big shift. From just reacting to actually having a strategy. We're going to break down the 4 core principles that will help you outsmart weeds for good.
So here they are: prevention, eradication, control, and management. Think of them as different levels of engagement. Prevention, that's your fortress wall. Eradication is for those small critical areas, like a seed bed or a greenhouse. Control is kind of the day-to-day skirmish. But management is the grand strategy. It's the whole shebang.
This slide right here, this gets to the absolute heart of it. It's the huge difference between just controlling weeds and actually managing them. On the left, with control, we're just reacting. We're playing whack-a-mole with every weed that pops up. But on the right, with management, we're being proactive. We're designing the entire system to give our crops the advantage from day one. It's the difference between constantly playing defense and finally leading the offense. So let's start with that first and, honestly, most powerful principle: prevention. This is where you can win the war before the first battle is even fought.
Now, these steps might seem almost too basic, but their combined impact is incredible. This is all about basic hygiene for your farm or garden, using clean seed, cleaning your tools, keeping the edges of your property tidy. Every single one of these steps is like closing a door that a weed could have snuck through. It's simple, but it's so powerful.
Okay, but of course, some weeds are always going to get through. And that brings us to the physical fight, the direct, hands-on, mechanical methods we use to take them out.
First up, the all-time classic, tillage. For centuries, farmers have used plows to turn the soil over. It's basically like hitting a giant reset button on the field. It buries the weeds that are there, it uproots new ones, and it gives your crop a totally clean slate to start from.
And then you've got the humble hoe. I mean, this tool is ancient, but it is still one of the most efficient ways to deal with young, shallow-rooted weeds. By just slicing them off at the surface, especially when they're little, you stop them in their tracks before they can really get a foothold. And in some cases, you can even fight weeds with fire. Burning is a really practical way to clear out fields of dried, mature weeds, say after a harvest. But more importantly, it can destroy a massive number of weed seeds just sitting there on the soil's surface, which prevents a ton of problems for the next season. And hey, if fire won't work, maybe water is the answer. In certain kinds of fields, like rice paddies, intentional flooding is a really powerful tool. By just submerging the land, you cut off the oxygen supply to the soil, and you effectively drown the weed species that aren't built for those conditions. The variety of these physical methods is it's pretty amazing.
And what this slide shows so well is how these exact same principles have just scaled up over time. We went from simple hand tools to small power readers, and now all the way up to these massive tractor-drawn machines that can weed multiple rows at once. The core idea is exactly the same, but the scale, it has completely changed.
But it's not a perfect solution. Physical methods, yeah, they're effective, and they're generally safe for the environment. But they can be super labor-intensive, you can accidentally damage your crops if you're not careful, and a lot of them really depend on having just the right soil conditions to work.
So physical methods work, but they are a lot of work. What if we could get the crops themselves to do most of the heavy lifting for us? This brings us to the smarter, not harder approach, using what we call cultural methods to rig the game in your favor right from the start.
This is all about using biology as a weapon. So instead of planting the same crop over and over, crop rotation totally disrupts the life cycles of weeds that got used to that one plant. Intercropping goes a step further, using companion plants to literally smother out the competition. And sometimes, the best defense is a good offense. Just planting a really dense, healthy stand of your crop creates this thick canopy that blocks out the sun, leaving weeds no light and no room to grow.
One of the most powerful cultural methods is good old-fashioned mulching. Whether you use plastic film or just a thick layer of straw, the goal is exactly the same: block the sunlight. If a weed seed can't get any light, it can't photosynthesize, and it's game over. Simple and so effective. Solarization takes that idea and turns up the heat, literally. You cover moist soil with clear plastic during the hottest part of the year. The sun's heat gets trapped and it raises the soil temperature so high that it actually cooks and kills weed seeds and pathogens before you even think about planting your crop. And you gotta love this one, it's so clever. It's called the stale seed bed. Here's how it works. You get your field all prepped, you water it, but you don't plant your crop. Nope, you're actually baiting the weeds. You're encouraging that first big wave of them to germinate, and then right as they get started, you wipe them all out with some very shallow tilling. Now you can plant your crop into a nice, clean bed. You've basically tricked the weeds into showing their hand early, which gives your plants a massive head start. So, okay, we've got prevention, we've got physical tools, and we've got these clever cultural strategies. But the real key, the thing that ties this all together, is that none of these work in a vacuum. To really truly win, you need an integrated plan. And this is really the bottom line. There is no single silver bullet. The best approach is always to layer your defenses. You might start with prevention, like cleaning your machinery. Then you use a stale seedbed technique. And you followed that up with mulching once your crop is established. See? Each layer handles a different threat, and together they create a really robust system that keeps your crop safe. This quote from the source material just says it all, doesn't it? It is all about planning ahead. It's about designing a whole system that expects and minimizes the pressure from weeds instead of just waiting around to fight them when they show up. And that leaves us with a pretty powerful thought to end on. We've spent centuries reacting to weeds, always fighting them after they appear. But what happens when we flip that script? When we start designing entire environments where our crops are so strong and our defenses are so well planned that weeds are never more than just a minor nuisance. Just imagine what that future of farming and gardening could really look like.